Why is the world so morally confused? Maybe the problem isn't just that people believe the wrong things. Maybe the deeper problem is how people are being formed. We live in an age of slogans, shame, algorithms, outrage, and imitation. But the church is supposed to be a pillar and a foundation of truth, the light of the world, even a city on the hill. So is the church forming people in truth, or are we losing them to the world's indoctrination machine? Is the church perhaps the said machine? So we're going to talk about that and maybe a little, maybe even a little bit more. So keep it right here. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the divine council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck. No, he made it up.
Oh, you
Not
actually made
not
up this concept.
not today, but he made
Yeah,
it up.
yeah. There's no ecclesio.
Ooh,
Like if you
new
look up,
heresy from Brian.
it's not a heresy.
Look at the big heresy on Brian.
Not my opinion. It's the truth.
Even though you made it up.
Yeah, that's getting cut out.
Those are my those
Well,
those are my
it's not like we're monetized. So
Well,
adventures
but
in
I
security.
think there's a couple of words that would like prevent future monetization, and
Yeah,
that's
it'd be
probably
like
one of them.
shadow banned or whatever.
well,
Remember that Mount Hermeneutics is free and available in all class
Well,
podcast platforms to include YouTube if you're watching the video. And if you are watching the video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I mean, it's free. Uh, Hit the like button, whether you like it or not. And, leave a comment, especially if you don't like it. If it's your first time with us, I'm Andre. That's Matt. That's Brian. Fellas, what's happening? It's been a minute.
that's right.
Gentlemen, how we doing?
All right, all right. Happy 250th, guys.
Yes.
Right?
For America, not you guys.
Well, I mean,
I don't think we're 250 if you add us all up.
as goes the country, so do
Yeah,
we.
we're about 150,
Yeah,
151.
Something like that.
Matt, are you 50 yet?
No.
December.
Oh, all right, so then we're 150 even.
Yeah.
Nice.
What's good? What's going on? What's shaking?
Man, so much is shaking. So much stuff is shaking. I don't even know I wouldn't even know how to sum up all the shaking that's going on in my life. So much going on. What about you guys?
Shaky. My adult children, my granddaughter and my daughter and my son-in-law have moved to Georgia.
Huh.
Yeah.
Did I know that was going to happen?
I don't think so. It's come up kind of abruptly. It's all tied to Sam's job and the fact that he's part of the evil empire that installs data centers.
Oh.
All right.
And
Bum, bum, bum.
part of the problem with making data centers, much like if you were the construction crew for the Death Star, is at some point it's completed.
Yeah.
Then you have to find another Death Star to go build.
That was actually my dad's job when I was growing up.
On the Death Star?
Data centers.
Mm-hmm.
So he was Admiral Tarkin for data centers. Yeah, we moved around a lot.
Tarkin.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, Grand Moff Tarkin, you nerd.
Yeah. There we go.
Just push.
Nerds.
You just want to demote him. Good.
Yeah.
Everybody knows a Grand Moff is higher than an Admiral.
Hello. Do you even Lucas, bro?
I mean, they don't give Death Stars to mere admirals.
Right, yeah. They fly that Star Destroyer thing.
Yeah, I didn't want to sound like a complete nerd, so I pretended not to know. But Dre pressed me on it. Yeah. So yeah, that's what so how's Carrie taken the abrupt change to her?
We've known it was coming. It's not like they just showed up yesterday and were like, hey, we're leaving. Carrie's been in joking denial about it. But throughout all this process, Sam and I have had a handful of conversations, and it's basically like he was asking me to tell him to stop being a travel electrician kind of thing. And I'm like, I can't tell you this, man. Like, this is your career. This is your family. This is a y'all
Right.
thing.
Right.
And, I won't say that I didn't plant some, little Jedi mind trick seeds here and there. Right. But he was like, I don't think this is a good long-term career for me and my family. And I'm like, yeah, me neither. And he's like, well, why didn't you say that? I was like, because you can't have your father-in-law tell you need a different job. Like, he's making great money. He loves what he does. He enjoys the work itself. Um, he just doesn't want to, have to constantly uproot his family every 6 to 9 months. Um,
That's a
and
short turnaround. Like
really short. It's worse than the
that's legit.
military. It's like,
Right.
it's crazy fast.
And it's strange. Like, I mean, I'm a big fan of Aubrey. That's my firstborn. That's my, some people say even my favorite child. I'll never say that.
I don't say it. They say it. They
They
say
the other
Andre.
they say they say everybody knows that she's, but I'm like,
She's a good kid. Some say the greatest.
how do you it's like you took my grandbabies though.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I had you, I raised you. Get
Right.
out of here.
Yeah.
I I'm not gonna know those little girls, and then they're gonna look
Yeah.
at me like, who's this dude? Get out of
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And
That's,
that kind of blows.
yeah. Yeah.
So
That was tough. And I was at church. They left on Sunday, and they were going to leave early, and I was at church, and they came by to say bye to me. And I didn't think it'd be that big of a deal. And then I opened the door to say bye to Susie, and the minute she saw me, she's trying to crawl out of the chair to get to me. And I'm like, I can't get you out, baby, because then you're going to fight getting back in. And then she started crying because I wouldn't get her out of the chair. And I'm like, all right, y'all need to just go. So yeah,
yeah,
that sucks. But
so
yeah,
this week, my son, he was at Lake Placid for about 2, 3 weeks, going to bobsled rookie camp for Team USA. Um, and then at the end, they have a push competition. All of a sudden, I'm going to be an expert on bobsledding coming up soon. Like, yeah, you're going to think that I've been following bobsled my whole life and I'm a winter sports guy, but you know,
Dre's like favorite movie, Cool Runnings, no
I
question.
mean, hello. Like, wait, I mean, is there even another one?
Do people
But
bring that up like all the time with you?
yeah, all the time.
I've
And
thought
you're
about
like,
it. I
you mean
thought
Cool
about it a few
Runnings?
times, but I'm like, I'll bet he's heard that.
Black people on ice? That's weird. Which is weird because and there's a few of them there. But in the push
It,
competition, he was overall second place. I think he made the standard. I think there was over 20 that went. I think 5 or 6 are going to camp
Nice.
for to see who makes Team USA
How many are on the
coming
team?
in October. Well, they have different teams. They have the luge dudes, the skeleton guy, and then there's a 4-man bobsled team, and I don't know if they have any alternates. So I don't know how the team's actually picked.
Right. Okay.
I was told there's a little bit of politics involved because there's the dudes that push, and then there's the pilot.
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter how fast you are, if you can't steer down the course, you suck.
Sure. Yeah.
So the pilot's the most important guy. Usually he's not the fastest or the strongest guy. He's just the
Right.
best.
Right.
Um, uh,
so did they want like a really little guy for that? Do
Not
like a
necessarily.
horse jockey?
And but he gets to pick his pushers. So it doesn't matter if you're the fastest one. If he doesn't trust you to jump in at the right time,
If you don't vibe.
right,
Yeah.
then you're
So
not on
is
you're not
that
on my team, bro.
is that all he does as pilot, or do they have to like do the
So
rules require him
there's
to?
4, yeah, so there's 2 guys that push on the left side, one guy pushes on the right side, and one guy is the what's called the breaker, and he pushes from the back. Usually the fastest, strongest dude is the breaker. And that's
That's dope.
Cooper's like that's the hardest one because you got to like push with both hands and you don't have the same leverage as you do when you push like ahead of you. Um, but it is interesting. I picked him up from the airport in San Diego and I'm driving to LA where he lives. So it was a long drive and he's kind of talked about his whole
Yeah.
experience and overall it's pretty cool. And which is interesting because he just finished all that training and he's back on the track today because in a couple of weeks he's going to go back to New York to be in the United States National Championships for the 100 meter.
I feel like he
So,
didn't answer my question about the pilot though.
uh, no,
There's like
they want everyone big. Like that's the thing. Like everyone's got to
like
be huge.
it does the pilot, does he just sit in there and steer, or does
No, he
he?
pushes. So that's why I said there's two guys that push on the left, and
Okay,
the pilot pushes in the front and then jumps in, and
got it.
everybody jumps in on his mark,
Okay.
and then all four of them are
And
in there. But
then they get nut to butt and then they sit
yep,
there and
they. Let's get ready for this lightning round.
let's do it.
Lightning round.
Is the world morally confused or morally conditioned?
Yes.
Both.
What shapes people more today, truth or social pressure?
Pressure.
Social pressure always.
Is guilt in our culture being resolved or redirected?
I don't understand the question.
Okay.
Redirected.
Can you have justice without a standard of righteousness?
No.
No.
Is the
You
church
can have
oh,
judgment, but not justice.
is the church forming thinkers or just repeaters?
Repeaters.
Yeah.
Can Christian language survive if its definitions are replaced?
No.
That's a tricky question.
Is outrage becoming the substitute for moral clarity?
Yes.
God, that disgusts me. Are Christians discipling culture or being discipled by it?
You mean mentoring culture? Discipling is not a word, Dre.
It's not.
It's not.
Well,
It's absolutely not.
That's why I smiled.
He knows how this sets me off.
it's fun to say though.
It is fun to say.
Just to push my buttons.
It's like plutonium.
So, are Christians being mentored by culture, or are they mentoring the culture?
Yeah. It's the second.
Yeah.
We are. Christians are mentoring the culture. Okay.
No,
No,
I'm sorry. The first.
other
then.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I misunderstood.
But the second one by the first time I read it.
Yeah.
Can you defend truth without reflecting Christ's character?
No.
So if you listened to that lightning round and you thought maybe it was all over the place, you're on par with us. So we're we're kind of all over the place. We think this is a worthy topic, and it's kind of dense material, and it's tough to like just jump in to a place. But basically, we think that Western civilization is coming to an end, and it has to do with morality, and the church can stop it,
that's dramatic.
Well,
or the church is the cause of it. I can't
Western
tell.
civilization is in steep decline. I don't know that it will end so much as just
Well,
degenerate
it
into
will
a.
turn into something completely unrecognizable.
Yeah, I
Right.
think we're on the front. I think we're in the start of another dark age. Um, if things go on the way they are, I think either we go into to quote Ronald Reagan, his uh, it sounds cliched when I quote that speech of his, but it fits. He was talking about communism, but we will either sentence our children to 1,000 years of darkness, or we'll and it has to be right now if there's not much time left, or we will undergo a renaissance, revitalization, restoration of the church, because only the church can be the thing that saves us. The failure of the church, I would argue, is the underlying problem. So that is my thesis. It's and as we were discussing, it's kind of it's kind of hard to know where to jump in here, because it's such a vast, multi-layered issue that and every layer is contentious. I don't think everybody agrees that civilization is in such steep decline. Um, and in what way it's in decline is probably, I take that back. I think both sides of the political aisle will heartily agree that civilization is in decline. The left thinks that
It's you. You're why. It's because
right.
they're fascists,
Yeah,
obviously.
it's the patriarchy.
Right.
Um, when no, like the patriarchy has never been weaker. Um, so whether it's in decline, the nature of the decline, what's the cause of the decline, all of these things are highly contentious. So it's hard to know where to jump in. And so I guess first we should define the decline.
Yeah,
Some
yeah,
you
yeah.
guys
What's that look like?
well, birth rates are plummeting. Um, except in Muslim countries, they're skyrocketing because they have four wives per household and umpteen many kids. They breed. I would say they breed like Catholic rabbits, but that's like the Catholic rabbits would say, they breed like Muslims. It's not an
Nice.
analogy, but and of course, the left celebrates the fact that birth rates are in decline because they see humans as an infestation on the earth. They're
Right,
anti-human, and so
right.
it's good that we're in decline, and that's part of that moral confusion is part of the problem.
Yeah.
Like
So
we,
yeah, so when you talk about birth rates, just so we can put some rough numbers on it. So they anthropologists or social scientists or whatever group you want to talk about, the standard opinion is that you have to have somewhere between a 2.5 and a 3 birth rate to maintain a culture.
yeah,
That's kind of the agreed upon number. And when we talk about the West, obviously Western Europe and the United States and Canada are kind of the West, right? Um, European birth rates are at like 1.7
Mm.
across the entire across all of Europe. I think it's the lowest in France, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head. That last I looked was like 1.2.
the most popular newborn baby name in the UK is Muhammad,
Yeah, yeah. Um, if
and
I
it's not because white people are
are
converting
naming
to
their kids
Islam.
Muhammad, yeah, yeah. I think Muslim birth rates in Europe is between 7 and 10.
Whoa, what?
Yeah, it's
Compared to
massive.
1.2?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if you think about, if anybody's thinking about like, well, what does a birth rate mean, right? And the reason you have to be at a 2.5 or 3 is because you have to replace the two parents, right? So just to maintain the population, you would have to have a 2 straight up, and then that doesn't take account for early deaths and accidents and illnesses and all those kinds of things. That's where the 2.5 to 3 comes in. So you're really just hedging around status quo population. um, the
Yeah,
us,
that 2.5 is the minimum.
yeah, in the us I think the birth rate's between 2.2 and 1.8. So we're actually falling below the 2 threshold, let alone the 2.5 threshold. So it's a problem everywhere. Now, I've heard it said in right wing groups, well, it's not that bad because it's really the left that are not populating. The right is still populating. But the problem is we're importing millions upon millions upon millions of people that have a different ideology and have a much higher birth rate. So it's funny to me that whole the great replacement theory was considered to be this like super right wing ethno Christian uh, mythology when it's actually like mathematically real.
Yeah,
Like
it's undeniable.
there's no
But
way you can tell me it's a racist myth
yeah,
of the great replacement theory.
it's a right-wing conspiracy theory that's not happening. But if it is happening, it's great, and you're racist if you don't like it. And it's
It is crazy that a lot of right wingers will talk about, well, if we just have conservative children and the left stops having children, the problem is that our indoctrination culture,
yeah,
we just pump children into that machine, and things just keep marching away that they're going.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not worried about not having children because they'll just take ours,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's what school is. It's the indoctrination machine. Like
yeah.
what are we learning? We're
But
learning
it's
on
not just school. I mean,
right.
if it was limited to school, it would be bad enough. But it's the your average Netflix show, or just the our culture is being pumped with this messaging that is antagonistic to Christianity and Christian values. And I would say that even like the church itself is it, it presents this very kind of passive, I dare say effeminate version of Christianity that just can't compete with, I mean, the church relies on indoctrination no less than the world does, except our as indoctrination, it's inferior. Like it doesn't, like you could have the best sermon in the world, and whatever you preach is gonna get crowded out by whatever they binge on Netflix when they go home, or a million other different influences. But so yeah, the we have a culture that doesn't really believe in itself, but the solution being offered by the conservatives is this Christian nationalism, which is probably going to make it worse. But anyway, I might be getting ahead of myself here. Um,
So I asked my first rapid fire question was, is the world morally confused or morally conditioned? And you both said yes.
Hmm. Yeah,
We,
I mean, so
we
the confusion is a result of the conditioning, right? Like now, whether the conditioning happened by happenstance or by design is a different conversation, right? We could certainly go into that tangent of who and why has
uh,
this conditioning come about, right? Was it a Marxist ploy to topple the United States? Was it a demonic ploy to topple all of Christendom? I mean, you could make cases for both of those. Um, there's a handful of theories you could
or
throw
are they
at
the same
this.
thing?
Well, and that's what I'm getting at is the goal of one is the other, right? Like I always, to use a different analogy, when in dog training, the idea of dog training is to condition your dog to want what you want. And when your dog is fully conditioned to want what you want, it's trained, right? Like that's what training is. Training isn't having the fight constantly over and over again. It's like, hey, when I point at that, you should want to go over there and do that thing. When I say fetch, you should already want to fetch. And that's where we're headed, is to be, as a society, conditioned to want whatever it is that our overseers, and I'm using that term because I don't know what else to use, what they want us to think and do.
um, yeah, and I don't think it's anything new. Like I don't think that we were enlightened, and morally clear, and then in the 20th century with the advent of radio and movies and TV, and then now the internet, everybody suddenly got confused. I think the default setting on humanity is, um, that we're not rational. We're by default we're conditioned into our beliefs and morality. The philosopher Rene Girard described it as mimetic, like it's imitative. Um, we see people acting a certain way. An example would be before I became a Christian, people would invite me to church, and I would ask them like, "Why do you believe this stuff?" And their response would be to kind of clutch their pearls and what you don't, um, meaning we'll approve of you if you agree with these things. Will shame and frown at you if you don't. And so people form their beliefs that way. And I think that's generally how it is for everybody. The problem is that the church kind of, for a good 1,000 years, when Christianity was compulsory, um, you could just being a faithful Christian was just a matter of civic responsibility, and you didn't get burned at the stake, so you went along with it. Protestant Reformation happened. We gradually, as a matter of law, got rid of the compulsory aspect of it, like the First Amendment and all that. You're not allowed, the government can't impose a religion on you. But the church basically relied on the fact that the church is the geographical center of a town. It's the moral center of the culture. It just sort of assumed the cultural right of way. With the advent of mass communication in the 20th century, and with the advent of automobiles, culture kind of spread out. Like people weren't geographically tied to a location, to a town that was centered on a church, and you were getting culture from all kinds of different, from all sides. Um, and we sort of, values come from storytelling. Predominantly. The church was the central storyteller for a couple thousand years until the advent of mass communication. And then we started getting stories from all sides and competing values. And the church has kind of been coasting on its cultural inertia ever since. What it should have been doing is teaching people first and foremost why Christianity is true. It should have been teaching people how to build our beliefs and our moral outlook from the ground up, based on first principles and evidence and reason, so that we're not susceptible to propaganda and mind control and stories competing for our morality. So that's kind of a long.
What so it's I mean, you've brought these ideas up before. I don't think they're necessarily wrong, but what if no, I'm just saying, just these just occurred to me as other ideas. One, I could see an argument that the reason that the church broadly, right, that it lost its influence because it's so watered down. And by watered down, I don't mean by message, I mean numerically. What if there was only 5 denominations instead of 500 denominations, right? Because there's a church on every corner in the US, but there's a church on every corner, right?
It's kind of like our entire culture, like as a nation, right? The monoculture before social media and even more mass communication. So before, like the only record that came out was whatever came out at Sam Goody, right? And you had to go buy Prince, Michael Jackson, or Motley Crue, right? There was really nothing else except for whatever you were into that came out at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Where now you have every single person who can be a streamer and put their content out there, and you can have
Any 3 knuckleheads in their mom's basement doing a
right.
podcast.
I mean, somebody exactly, but you can have somebody with 10 million followers, and in the grand scheme of things, 10 million sounds really good if you sold that many records. But if you have 4 billion on the net and you have 10 million followers, that could be exclusive to them. Like, for example, Matt's a Prince fan. I'm a Michael Jackson fan. The difference is that we both know who Prince and Michael Jackson is. Where Brian can be the fan of John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt over here.
It's Queen.
That guy's awesome.
And he loves that dude, but neither one of us have ever heard of him.
Yeah.
So the culture is so watered down and spread out. Same thing with movies,
in
TV
all
shows.
seriousness, though, his name is my name too.
I mean, so we all should know. So I mean, he's a bad example. That's a bad example. I should have come up with something else. Like I don't even know. I'm on the spot now, and now I'm ruined. It's over.
Ian Moore. Ian Moore would be a real.
I mean, F that guy. I don't know that guy, but
what's funny is I've been like telling you guys about Ian Moore for 30 years, and you still don't know who he is.
I don't know who that is. What are you talking about?
Like there was this real life example right under your nose that like just has never penetrated. But anyway,
I think you're on the same vein that I'm on, right? I know, Dre, we brought this up when the movie Michael came out, and the conversation that that's never going to happen again, irrespective of the level of talent.
Right.
The environment in which we live from an entertainment point of view could never replicate a Michael Jackson. Um, you know, Taylor Swift is probably arguably in that same stratosphere. And the success that Taylor has had might actually be more impressive numerically than what Michael accomplished
Right.
relative to the competition that she's up against. But that doesn't, we don't know because we can't measure them because it's a different universe.
So how do you relate that back to the church?
Well, so the point is that, using your town center concept, right? When there was a town center, like there isn't a town center anymore.
Yeah.
And so the ability of an organization to have this influence that it used to have by default, maybe the blockbuster analogy comes to mind, but
Like
like
if I don't like what's being preached at this church,
they could just go somewhere
yeah,
else.
I
The
just
the
go,
the marketplace concept or analogy for churches is a very real problem, but
yeah.
that didn't used to exist in the way that it does today.
Well,
I'm
not in
not
the
saying
way it did today, but
that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you didn't have choices, but like, let's use a movie reference for ye olden times. So in the Footloose story, right? One church drove the political opinion of an entire town, right? They weren't allowed to dance because the pastor said so. And the pastor really only said so because some kid died in a drinking and driving accident that happened after a dance. Like that's what fleshes up. Spoiler alert for anybody that hasn't seen
If you
Footloose.
haven't seen the 1984 Footloose,
But that's a great example of Brian, what you're talking about, where the church in that town, I don't remember the name of the town. I wish I could pull that out of my brain.
Beaumont.
Um, it was Beaumont,
It
Texas.
was, I don't think was it. Wasn't it Beaumont?
Really? Anyway,
I think
mm.
so.
look it up while I'm talking. So, but because that church had that pull because there was only one church. It wasn't like half the town was like, but we like to dance. And Pastor Tommy over at the Church of Christ said it's okay to
He
dance.
said we're going to dance over
So
here.
so
As a matter of fact,
take that Baptist pastor, and
as a matter of fact, we're gonna bump his numbers up. He's like,
right,
whoa, whoa,
yeah,
you can't dance over there? God, dancing's
right,
cool.
right. And that would have been, it would have been just as big a problem, right, if popularity was swinging
Well,
theology. But in
but
fairness, we find out in that movie as an example that it wasn't theology that was even driving the culture, right? It was just culture.
yeah,
But
and I think that underscores the problem is that previously churches relied on that kind of
control,
monopoly
yeah,
on moral authority, and it wasn't you weren't people weren't being transformed by the gospel necessarily. They were being socially conditioned into civic conformity. Whether or not you believed Christianity was true, if you believed it was true, it was because it was the conditioning that I talked about. It was the pearl clutching outrage that you don't believe that got people to go along with it. Um, but so that was a problem in itself. The the culture was small enough, at least scaled to the church, that the church still had some influence and was able to indoctrinate and condition people that way, or at least kind of had the sufficient authority so that there were social sticks and carrots to keep them in line. Today, it's grown to the point where um, there religion is such a vast and varied marketplace that but you still have market forces controlling what Christianity is rather than biblical
Christianity
truth.
controlling the marketplace.
Right.
Yeah. No,
The
I agree.
which the preachers, which isn't to say that preachers all get together and conspire to see what version of the gospel is going to get the most butts and seats. It's just that the preachers who sincerely preach those things that are going to get the most butts and seats are going to be rewarded by the marketplace. They're going to enjoy the largest market share and set the standard for what normative Christianity is. And then anybody who is not preaching that is going to because the Bible refutes it,
Hmm.
or they have a paradigm of Christianity that is more consistent with the Bible, but not with the market standard, where they're going to be a weirdo and an outlier
Yeah.
and be rejected.
Yeah.
Um,
I was given this concept by the CIO of General Dynamics. I won't name him. I have no idea where he is today. Pretty big dude in the corporation of General Dynamics. And he said to me one day, he said, "Matt, the first liar wins." And I said, "Excuse me?" And he goes, "Yeah, no, the first liar wins. The first person to have a position on a topic gets to set the narrative. And the higher that person is in an organization, the more dogmatic that belief system becomes. And it becomes increasingly harder for people that come after that person to disabuse everyone of this false concept. And I think you're explaining that really well in a cultural religious tone, right? Because if the one big church in town says this and all the other pastors are like, yeah, we got to, that kind of makes sense. We've got to, focus, we got to center on that same concept. But then some guys over here reading his Bible going, what? He's like, it doesn't say that in here. And everybody's like, well, you're a nut job because those three big pastors that have a billion people showing up and, you know, do laser light shows and everything, they said this. And so it must be true. It's
yeah,
probably,
and to relate this back to moral confusion, um, this is kind of a multi-tiered point, but I'm going to try to make this concise,
oh boy.
so I'm not monologuing at you guys. But jump in if there's a serious question or objection. Um, so,
Hang on.
are you just joking? So, to illustrate what the quickest way to do this is with an illustration. Um, this is a Facebook conversation I have a lot, but it doesn't have to be on Facebook. Um, Somebody accused me of homophobia because I believe what the Bible says about homosexuality. Um, so I asked the person, and so what you're calling homophobia, this is immoral, this is bad and wrong, right? Well, of course. Okay. Well, by what criterion? And like who says it's wrong? By like
Mhm.
what to what authority are you appealing when you tell me that that's wrong? And they might that if they don't successfully resist my efforts to Socratic method them into saying it, they'll say if they don't see where it's going, oh well, society has agreed that this is wrong. Um, well, okay, well, 50 years ago, what you're calling homophobia was the standard. Like homosexuality was virtually universally condemned. Society had agreed that it was wrong and that what you call homophobia was right. Would you have been in the wrong 50 years ago? Um, then they hem and they haw, and I kind of point out, according to their terms, society cannot be the standard bearer of morality.
Can I jump in right there?
Sure.
So by that logic or standard or defense that you're giving, is that perhaps why if you're an activist, you can't let your enemies succeed because then society could shift to their side? Is that why they need to shut it down immediately at the source? Is that why you need to be shouted down anytime you disagree with that kind of thinking or conditioning? Is
I
that
don't.
why they're so zealous to shut you up? Because they are afraid that perhaps with I mean you can't, for example, a lot of times you talk about racism, and anyone who knows me knows that I actually don't care. Racism does not affect me whatsoever. And I guess recently the white nationalists were walking, don't care. If we ignore them, they go away. What the problem is that people think that people won't ignore them, and that more people will be convinced by their argument, and more people will jump to their side, and then our whole entire society will shift back to whatever that racism or belief is.
Wait,
and
that's an
perhaps
option. Wait, that's
I
an
don't
option.
I
right.
don't I
So I
don't think
think
they've
so if you say that 50 years ago homophobia was the standard, and then society changed over to say no, being gay is okay, and then a guy like you comes out and says that it's not okay, they have to shut you down before a bunch of people join you and shift society back to the way it was 50 years ago. And that's why activists are so violent or so uh,
I think you're describing well the people at the top. And I know this sounds like a conspiracy theory, but I don't think the ground level, the person you see on TikTok holding the signs with the blue hair and the septum ring, the feral activists, I really don't think they've thought that far ahead. I
right,
think
but they are soldiering for that.
I think they're just so like filled with this righteous feeling of moral superiority. I don't think there's thought behind it though.
I don't
I think it's conditioning.
maybe it's
But
because I travel in different circles. I travel in intellectual circles. So these I don't know if they're at the top, but that's the type of argument that they would make to me. You know, these are people that are super liberal, super
yeah.
lefty, right? Basically, they are proclaimed to be socialists and say that this is why we don't want society to go back to the way it was in 1950s.
Well, and you're describing like when you listen to politicians talk, mostly leftists and Democrats, some
Sure,
Republicans, because I think Republicans kind of get drawn into it. Like, on the talking head shows, somebody will try to claim the moral high ground by insisting that the majority of Americans agree with X.
sure,
Therefore, I'm right. And the idea being like democracy is the source of value. If enough people believe it, that makes it right. And I think the people at the top, there's a book called that came out in 1989 called After the Ball: How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Homosexuals in the 1990s. It's written by a guy named um, Kirk Marshall and something Hunter something. Anyway, one of them is like was like a big shot PR advertising guy in the 80s. Another one was a psychologist, and it was basically this handbook on how to transform the culture to shift our societal values in favor of homosexuality, portray them in a certain portray, do TV shows that portray gays in a certain light. Um, Insert a character who is loudmouth and unsympathetic, make him the conservative Christian who is bullying the gays, and this will arouse people's protective instincts, and it's a diabolically brilliant playbook on how to transform a culture. And we've I didn't know about this book until like the early 2000s. Got it on Amazon. It's like $500 if you want to buy a copy of it. But it basically describes the entire like programming slate of the 1990s and early 2000s and on and on. And the stuff that we're hearing about now with the transgender cartoon characters, it's the same thing, but they base but it shows that yeah,
and
that
now it's settled science, right?
right. Settled science.
Right,
For those who are listening, I did the scary quotes to.
because the culture has shifted. So I mean, why would you argue with that? Like when
Hmm.
you talk about everybody knows.
What's the phrase I hear all the time? Enjoy being on the wrong side of history.
Yeah, that's I have the moral authority
Yeah.
to, but it's always appealing to the masses as the source of morality.
Hmm.
And if you can if social agreement is the source of right and wrong, and if you can manufacture that,
or,
then
or
you're
just
basically
manipulate social agreement
yeah,
easily.
yeah, you can determine what's right and wrong. But the people today who insist that homophobia is evil because society has agreed would have to also agree that 50 years ago homophobia was right. And if they had lived in 1930s Germany, they would have been hailing Hitler and goose-stepping and marching Jews into concentration camps with everybody else because society agreed that that's what should happen. Bottom line, I'm basically like alluding to the moral argument for God's existence, but more so the theological argument for morality's existence. Like morality is it's just a matter of collective preferences if God doesn't exist. It's why the Bible says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. If you don't fear God, you don't believe that you're accountable to anybody besides culture. And if so, but if you reject God's existence, then your moral compass is just geared to whatever the the loudest human influence is. And so most Christians will recognize that's bad. That's where the culture went wrong. That part shouldn't be terribly controversial for Christians. Where it relates to us is that if the church is the product of market forces, I don't like the version of Jesus being taught at this church. I can just go shop around for a Jesus I like. I think that Christians have lost that fear of God. We approach Christianity largely as consumers. Um, we're in the driver's seat. The Christianity has to conform to me, not me to it. That's the effect that
Right.
the marketplace of religion has on Christianity. Um, I think that I think Christians are missing that fear of God. And so our own moral formation, it's not really any better than the feral godless leftists who manufacture it from
Now,
society.
is that a product of Christians being lazy, where they want to be told what they're supposed to do or how they're supposed to behave or how morality is supposed to be, and then like or dislike whatever they say, like because the words are right in front of you, right? So it's like the church isn't teaching people how to think. They're telling them what to think, and then people just become repeaters and not thinkers. And it's the same thing in schools where you you get a version of history without really all the facts of history. You're just told, hey, these events happened and this is the way you're supposed to believe that, and now it's settled science. So if more church leaders, I don't know, would assign, I don't know, homework, like, hey, what does that mean to you? Let's talk about it. What's it supposed to mean? What are the words supposed to be saying? And what does
Well,
that relate to?
yeah,
And
but
you learn how to think about what you're taking in instead of just sitting in a pew with your chin on your hands saying, "Please feed me, Pastor, and tell me what it is I'm supposed to believe about that." What are we doing?
I think that there's a couple of problems, and they all blend together, right? So I think all of the answers to all of the questions you're throwing out, Dre, it's all of that. It's modern Americans. I can only really speak for Americans. I don't have as good a view of Christians in Western Europe or South Korea or Japan or wherever, right? Like I know us. Um, Modern American Christians aren't encouraged, trained, or rewarded for thinking critically about the Bible,
yeah,
right? Like,
all the social incentives are to maintain the status quo.
yeah, they show up, and the problem is, in my opinion, like, I mean, we can I haven't sat and back chained this around this topic, but as I'm doing it in real time, going to church is very different from studying the Bible,
Oh, yeah.
right? Like going on a Sunday is Sunday church is based around worshiping and fellowshipping and a little bit of a message that's usually, packaged up for light reading and pat you on the butt and send you out the door.
Yeah, it's moral therapeutic deism, not
I don't,
Christian discipleship.
well, I think it's in the middle of those two. I think this therapeutic moral deism is, I think that's a little unfair. I think it depends on how strongly or how fully one engages in the events that are there. So hang on,
Well,
I have a reason for saying what I'm going to say. So let me say
okay.
this real quick. So, for the listeners that don't know, viewers, I've recently, in the last 6 months, been playing guitar in my church band. I will openly admit that until 6 months ago, I essentially never listened to praise music. In fact, I typically came to church late on purpose to miss half of the 30-minute praise session because I hate standing. And at my church, you stand during the praise, and it used to just aggravate me. And like, I'm going to change gears real fast. Me and Austin, my son, we got tickets to go see Disturbed in St. Louis. So we drive to St. Louis to watch a Disturbed concert because I bought tickets ahead of time in the A row of the 200 section. So think about that for a second. What's the A row of the 200 section mean? I didn't have to stand up to watch the concert because there was nobody in front of me. Because I hate standing up, even at a metal concert. Like, that's just who I am as a person. I don't want to stand for 3 hours and rock out. I want to sit like this and be like,
Hey, I'm still here. I'm just going invisible.
okay,
Keep talking. I'm
all right.
listening.
So anyway, this whole praise music thing, there's a really, I think, unfair rap that it's a trope to say, oh, modern praise music, they just repeat the same verses over and over again, and there's no real substance, and it's theologically unsound. I don't think that's all true. There's some of music that's not great. Some of it is just bubblegum pop music that says a couple of words, and there's some of it that I've listened to that because I've seen the videos, whatever, and I go listen to them, and the lyrics are very vague. They never really say God or anything like that. It's just like feel good music. But my instinct tells me that those are the songs that they're singing at the mega churches and at these, the churches that we all make fun of anyway. Because I will say that the songs that are in our rotation that I've learned to play and that we've performed are theologically very sound pieces of praise. Like the lyrics are very clearly based
Well,
in biblical, concepts.
I was referring more to the sermons
No, no,
than
no,
the.
no. But I'm making a broader point, right? Like, if you showed up to a church like mine, and I'm not stumping for my church, I happen to be a fan of my church. That's why I go there. But if you showed up on time and you fellowshipped beforehand, and then you came in and you actually engaged in the worship that's being led and sang the words and thought about the words and let those words come out of you from a place of meaning, that praise puts you into a different headspace versus showing up late, slipping in, and then just showing up for the 30-45 minute session that the dude's going to his little TED talk, and you're looking at your watch, and then he's done, and then you're like, okay, we're cool, and we get out of here, and you leave. It's kind of like that concept that you get out of what you put into things. And I think, and I'm saying I was guilty of it also, that I think a lot of American Christians view Sunday morning as a very transactional experience rather than showing up to say, what can I get out of today? What can I pull from this service? Is it a song that hits me a certain way? Did the message sound like it resonated with what I'm experiencing or what I'm struggling with? Or if you're like me, you're sitting in service and the preacher says something and you go, what? And then I pull out my Logos app on my phone and I start searching and I start cross-referencing. In 30 minutes, I have no idea what the pastor's saying, and I'm doing my own Bible research in the pew in real time, right? And I've got notes, and I'm like, I got to go figure this out because I'm somewhere else completely. But I'm glad I showed up so that he could say the one thing that caused me to think this, to go down this rabbit hole. But it goes back to, I don't think that people show up on Sundays to actually get a closer, deeper understanding of God or his word. I think they either show up to Brian, to the point that you made, they show up to feel better because they're going through something else in life and they want this group experience where people are, holding on to them and praying for them and crying with them and making them feel good. Or they're just socially punching a card that says, I was here, I was seen, and now I'm going to go home. But I think the whole long-winded point that I'm trying to make is I don't think that's on the church. I think that's on the Christian.
Well,
I think we own some of this in that, like we commonly say this is the church's fault. This is the church's fault. Last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll yield my time back to the gentleman from Edmond. Um, when we were all three in the Marine Corps, and Brian, you weren't with me and Dre when I read this, but there was an article in the Marine Corps Times, and it was a letter about Marines these days. And it was some, sergeant, staff sergeant, gunnery sergeant, whatever. And he was bitching about how young Marines suck and they don't this and they don't that. And
Ugh.
back in my corps, right? And it was blah, 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 blah. And he was basically chastised, not basically, he was openly attacking and chastising drill instructors for not producing better recruits to be privates that hit the Marine Corps. And it was the common thing that we all heard and probably expressed ourselves at one time or have today or whatever, right? But the response email wasn't an email. The response letter, because this was in the late 1900s, the response letter to this Marines open, you know, grievance was, last time I checked, the drill instructor's job is to produce privates. It's the NCOs and staff NCOs who actually shape the young Marines to become senior lance corporals, corporal sergeants, and staff sergeants. So it's every sergeant's job, it's every staff sergeant's job, it's every gunnery sergeant's job. It's not the drill instructors or the general's job to make Marines be Marines. It's the entire Marine Corps. It's every single Marine that interacts with these guys that it's their job. And so the analogy that I'm making to this is, when we say the church, I know that we kind of collectively agree that that includes the members in the pews, not just the people on the dais. But I think sometimes that gets lost when we talk about this monolithic thing of the church, because we're all the church, not just the pastor and the pastor's wife and the worship leader and the youth leader, right?
yeah,
So that's the only point that I wanted to make.
I agree with that. In addressing this question, though, I think it's fair, since we're talking about the problems that are created by a church that is created by market forces. I think it's fair to describe it, to break it into religious suppliers and religious consumers. Um, the religious consumers, they go to there's a certain kind of religion that they demand, and where there is a demand, the marketplace will supply, and that supplier will enjoy the greater market share, and then that will set the standard for the product in the industry. And if you aren't offering that, well, then you're going to be cut out of the market. So you do, like, it's I do think that the individual Christian layperson goes to churches with a certain set of expectations, and the preachers who subvert those expectations, who say, well, no, you're not going to get that here. Here we do discipleship, and discipleship makes demands on you. You have to make every effort to lavishly supply your faith with arete, excellence, virtue, knowledge, self-mastery, perseverance, godliness, brotherly kindness, love. That's what this church is about. I think that will sound very good in a sermon form, and then in the day-to-day operation, expecting that of churchgoers, they risk losing their market share. They risk their livelihood. So there's kind of a mutually reinforcing loop here between the suppliers and the consumers, where all of the incentives are against doing actual Christianity.
That's
And
an interesting point and perspective. And this is the portion of the show where Andre gives his experience with J-Dubs and Mormons, right? So those are two pseudo-Christian religions in America that are not popular, right? People disparage them all the time. So in the marketplace of ideas, that's not a fun place to be, especially a Jehovah's Witness, right? You're missing out on all kinds of worldly shit like Little League, Christmas, birthdays, and fun stuff. But their worship goes multiple hours a day or multiple days in the Jehovah's Witness case. Now, what's interesting to me is that there'll be like the general session and then the breakout groups. Now you have the outline of what is going to be studied a whole year in advance. So my family would on a Friday or a Saturday before the Sunday read the entire Watchtower article, go over the questions, cross-reference them in our scripture, and I am, 11 and my brother is 6, and we know what scripture that question is coming from for the second hour so that we're prepared that when we show up to class that we have the answers and we know what's going on. In the LDS church, there's a discussion in the Bible study because they go over whatever chunk they're reading that day. And many times the non-member in the back, Andre's like, hey, uh, I'm looking at this. What do you, why are we saying that? And everyone just looks like, what? Like I read this last night and I don't know why. And so to me, I think these smaller cultish religions, I think that the rest of Christendom has something that they can take away from that, where the homework is real, uh, the consequences of shame or embarrassment in the Jehovah's Witness case, because if you didn't know the answer, all the other kids your age look at you and like, hey, you didn't read your homework, you suck. There was actual peer pressure in that, um, and you got to come prepared in your group when you're a Mormon, when you're reading the scripture, you're going to be asked a question, you're going to be asked to read a passage, you're going to be asked your opinion on that, and you read it in advance so that everybody's kind of on the same page.
Yeah, and I think there are reasons that those things work, and I'm betting you're agreeing. What you kind of indicated, you might already agree with me. There are reasons those things work within those groups where it wouldn't work in the mainstream
And
church.
also, there's no paid clergy. So for Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, it's not their livelihood. They're there every Sunday to do the thing, and the attendance is secondary.
Um,
Well, that's a second issue though, because like what's wrong with the idea? This is genuine conversation, by the
Sure,
way.
sure.
So I don't have a idea with where I'm going with this, but what's wrong with the field of dreams concept, right? If you build it, they will come. Brian, I don't disagree with you that we got where we are because of, protecting membership, so to speak, right? But I've heard pastors say at different churches, I'm just going to do what the Spirit's telling me to do. And if you all leave, then you're all just going to leave. But like, I'm only going to preach the way that I feel inspired to preach, and the church will grow or it won't. Right. Um, the whole church in Acts, right, where they were doing everything perfect. Yeah, look at us. We're living in a commune and we're preaching great and the church is growing and whatever, right? Um, why doesn't that model just happen? And that's not a rhetorical question. It's not a loaded question. I'm just thinking out loud. Like,
um,
and I'm saying it like, if God is real and Christianity is real, then why wouldn't he reward faithful preaching? And then that
well,
be the biggest and most amazing church would be the best church, not the one where they're following a business plan.
and I think that the answer to that kind of addresses Dre's model here. I think it doesn't sound like this intensive Bible study and hours of worship. I don't it it doesn't sound like the all of the people there doing that are doing that because they see the value in doing that for its own sake. They're doing that because of the pressures being placed on them by their community.
I mean, sure, but I think that the Mormons have this thing called Family Home Evening, and it's every Monday. And and I don't know that that's about social pressure. I think that's about this is what an LDS family does. We all pray together and we all break bread together, or we fast until it's time for this activity, and the activity has a theme for that week. I mean, I don't know that that's about social pressure more than it is, worship and the head of the household taking over the family, say, this is what we do
the,
on Mondays.
these are part of the values that are inculcated into them as Mormons, and so these are the things that are expected of them. I mean, I'm not saying that
I
there's
mean,
not
sure.
enjoyment in it, but what I'm getting at is that, and I'm not saying Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons are uniquely like this. I started out by pointing out how by default we are all products of our conditioning. We don't build our worldviews and our belief systems and our values from the ground up on first principles by rational processes according to reason and evidence. We're conditioned into them. Um, the more kind of tight knit a group is, the more of that social conditioning they can exert. Like if you don't do that as a Jehovah's Witness, you can get kicked out of the community, and then you
Yeah. Yeah,
lose
yeah, true.
your entire. Same with Mormonism. If you're not, if you don't conform, you can be cast out. And I think any most groups are like that, and that's not even necessarily wrong to a certain degree, but it's
The question is why.
yeah,
At the end of the day, it's what is your why? Are
yeah.
you doing this because you feel led, or are you doing it so you don't lose your family?
And so and not even because you feel led, but because I would say that the version of Christianity that we have, the popularized Neoplatonic, um, Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox influenced Protestantism that's about going to heaven when you die as a disembodied spirit. Um, Within that system, all of this stuff that we read about that we're supposed to be doing as Christians, like discipleship, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do it. The value of doing that it's not apparent. Um, so like discipleship, we have things we do that we call discipleship, but they're not really the discipleship of the Bible. Like Second Peter we were talking about earlier. He talks about because of God's promises, we can participate in the divine nature and escape the corruption of the world caused by appetites. Therefore, make every effort to add to your faith, to lavishly supply your faith with arete, virtue, excellence, and all these qualities of the divine nature. It's supposed to be an entire way of life pursuing this transformation. Um, that that transformation doesn't make any sense if we all just go to heaven when we die anyway, and that's the main point of it. It's sort of we kind of water that down, so it's a hard sell. But there's an even more fundamental layer where people don't believe because they've been initiated with the case for the resurrection, with the arguments for God's existence, and so that they're people. We tend to treat faith as if it's an epistemology, as if you ask somebody why they believe this, they're likely to say, "What? It's because I put my faith in this," which is not an answer, but the bottom line, like for Christians are not being initiated into Christianity in a way that they know it to be true to begin with. so that they know for sure that this level of investment that it demands is even worthwhile. They're on board as long as all of the social incentives reward conformity with this certain level um, of Christian identity and compliance, but it's not the level of faith and even what we call faith in the church, it's not enough to inspire that kind of discipline and commitment. On the other hand, if somebody does have that level of discipline and commitment, what do you do with that within the church? Like, what is there to, like, if you're on fire and you're ready and willing to do anything and everything and to devote as much effort and time to the purposes of the church, and you present yourself to your pastor to put you to use, what is there to do with it? There's not much of an outlet. And it's part of that self-referential, that self-reinforcing loop where we just have this different paradigm where like the specific components of Christianity that we're supposed to be doing, they don't really make sense within that system, but we're not willing to get rid of the bad system and embrace the new one because you lose your market share. You alienate people. You might lose your livelihood. And so, it's a big problem. I don't know the
Yeah,
answer to it.
I think Matt was talking about earlier, like maybe it's not so much the church, but the actual Christian himself. And I think that even in other facets of life other than religion, I mean, you have coaches and team leaders that, they're all pulling in one direction because their incentive is to win, right? So if you can have an inspired leader and then inspired a small unit leader, then you can win. The American military is better than the rest of the world because of our small unit leadership. Because in the Marine Corps in particular, we have Lance Corporals leading. We have 19-year-old dudes leading other men into things like war.
And
Um,
alien technology helps.
of course. And in the churches that I mentioned or the religious organizations, it was incumbent on whoever the father was in that house. That's the social pressure. Do you want your family to win or not? Do you, in the Mormons case, it's we have a promise to be bound together for all time and eternity as a family. Do you want to be on the outside of that? I think I think we need more small unit leaders than even pastors. We need, you know, a men's group and the women's group. And I think that the churches do a decent job of that. Except that what are they training them in?
Well, that's
They're
that's
right.
I
So we have a men's group, but what are we doing if we're just playing basketball?
yep. Yep.
Then then what are our small unit leaders doing?
I I saw a pastor, some feed, I don't even know where it was. I couldn't quote it, but it was in one I was scrolling, and he said what the first part of what you said. He criticized the church broadly and said the problem is, how do you fix it? This is the problem, blah blah blah. And he actually said what you just said. He goes, we have to start in the home. Like parents, fathers have to get back to actually leading their families spiritually. We don't have that anymore. Families bring their kids to church and just drop them off, right? And it's always happened. I'm not suggesting
Sure.
that's a new trend, but it's becoming increasingly more problematic, right? I was guilty of it when my kids were younger. Alyssa, I didn't raise Alyssa nearly as fully in from a biblical perspective as I should have, as I did Austin. Um, Not to say that I raised her to be a heathen, directly, but the Christian impact and emphasis was more implied than overtly spoken. right? I raised her to be a good person, and my moral compass was always driven by my faith, but my faith wasn't well formed enough to represent it in of itself, right? Um, and so people that are in a less strong position than me, Brian talks about being raised, in a godless household, and I don't say that to be funny. I'm being clinical. Um, it was by the grace of God that you found your way to Christianity. But what if you hadn't, right? That we have more households that are raising their children outside of Christianity, outside of faith, outside of what's right, and I think that's where the OODA loop, the decision making framework that's causing culture to then, to Brian's point, you know, seek the marketplace that isn't as robust a representation of Christianity, right? It's a cycle. It's not just, I don't think there's just one point, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. I know, Brian, you always talk about how, the church is failing, the church is failing, and I don't disagree with you. I struggle with the idea that we could just go, well, if we just fix the church, then everything just magically fixes itself all the way around. And that just
Well,
that just feels too Pollyanna, to say that that's
it's not magic,
right.
but yes, if we just fix the church, everything would logically unfold so that everything else would be fixed. I think a lot of fathers don't know how to raise their kids that way. The Christianity they get on Sunday morning, if they go to Sunday morning, and I think a lot of people aren't seeing the value of this weekly exercise of going to church, because it is so much therapeutic moral deism, and there's this idea of going to heaven. The point of the gospel is the church is supposed to be the temple of God, where the very presence of God dwells on earth. The Spirit of God is embodied in Christians, but we have to understand that, and our role in being the locus of His presence, which means committing to that transformation.
I
And
know
that's
what you
and
meant, but
that's
but I want to clarify a word you just said. I know you said locus, and there's no T in that word, but just that's the center point, is like a
Sure.
convergence. I assure you, a whole bunch of listeners went to what? Sorry, Brian. Keep going.
Um, and so we're supposed to be God's kingdom on earth to renew the world. Um, to put it in more sociological terms, politics is downstream from culture, culture is downstream from religion. If the church placed a value on apologetics, teaching people why Christianity is knowably and rationally true according to evidence and reason, you would have far fewer people growing up, going away to college, renouncing their Christianity because they've been taken in by their campus indoctrination. Education on why Christianity is true goes deeper and is more permanent than indoctrination, but we rely entirely on indoctrination. We do that because we have a a version of salvation that legitimizes the indoctrinate. You ask people why you believe this stuff. Oh, the Holy Spirit has validated it. But you can't explain it. You're not able to, like, maybe that's true, but you can't pass the life on to anybody else. If we just did that one thing, we would reap dividends beyond what we can imagine. But also, doing actual discipleship, that part of in Second Peter about making every effort to add to your faith these qualities of the divine nature. It's easy to preach a sermon and tell people to do that and read the scripture. Yeah, it but I don't think the point is to put all the onus on the individual Christian to do that. I always pair that with Ephesians 4, where Paul says, uh, Christ, grace was uh, Christ gave grace according to his, I don't remember exactly what he said, but to each of us, grace has been given according to Christ's will. It was he who gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors, some teachers, to prepare God's people for works of service until we all reach the unity in the faith and we're built up in the knowledge of the Son of God and reach the maturity of Christ. Then we will no longer be infants tossed to and fro by the wind and tossed around on the waves by every wind of doctrine. Um, instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow up into the fullness of Him who is the body of Christ. But basically, the church exists to mentor us in that transformation. That's the entire purpose of it. Um, in my men's group a few weeks ago, the guy leading it made the remark that like we have all of these programs in the church, apologetics groups or so-called apologetics groups, men's groups, and this kind of ministry and that kind of ministry. But this is him saying, this isn't me, but he pointed out that we have very little transfer of that transformation happening. Um, and I was kind of like, wait a minute, say that again. And and I'm like, isn't that like what that's the whole thing though? Like if you don't have that transformation, what are we even doing here? We're just we're just spinning our wheels. We are playing Christian. That's all we're doing. Um, so if we had apologetics, if we initiated the people into that and made sure they believed and made sure they could not necessarily be, master apologetics themselves, but just be able to pass an oral exam to demonstrate that they actually sincerely believe and know why it's true. And then we undertook to mentor them in that transformation. If we made that the whole focus of the church, everything else would take care of itself. We'd have, like, imagine if the Christians in this country could make a rational defense of Christianity to critics if they understood how their morality is grounded and the
Yeah.
fear of God.
I saw another reel or whatever, and he was criticizing how churches are always like, you need to invite a friend and have them come on this service and, tell them to come to church. And he's like, every church spends all their time and energy trying to get all of their members to volunteer and serve on different teams and to do all this different stuff in the church. He goes, if they spent all their time teaching people how to tell their coworkers that God's real, their coworker would be like, hey, can I come to that place where you go? Because I want to hear more about this God that's real. And it would go a lot further than, you should just come to church with me. Why? It's great, man. It's fun. We're going to do this game night. And they're like,
that sounds lame. I'm going to B-dubs and I'm going to watch the game.
Right, exactly.
But what often happens, and I've brought enough friends to church, like before when I was in the Marine Corps, I would bring friends to church, and um, they'd start hanging out in our group, and my friends became his friends. Nobody pressured him. We didn't. There weren't these deep conversations. He didn't have many questions about God, but there was always this sort of unspoken, like, we're all Christians here. We're all part of the tribe. We love you too. You're welcome to come along with us. But he's not a full member of the tribe until he's been initiated, until he too is a Christian. And so you have this social pressure and you want to belong.
Yeah.
And so, oh yeah, I've had the Holy Spirit just, made me a believer, and now I'm one of you. And I think he believed that in the moment. I was young enough and immature enough that I didn't like, something about it didn't sit right with me, but it was consistent with everything that I'd been taught about how it all works. So I couldn't quite articulate why that was bad, but that's the usual thing. Invite your friend to church, they'll get socialized and become a member of the tribe and do the things that we think of as conversion, but they're not. they have no idea
Mm-hmm.
if it's true, why it's true, that it's true. They might not even really think they they might just think that belief is, you just fake it. You just sort of suspend disbelief, and that's what we're all talking about when we talk about faith. Um, so
Hmm.
So how do we compete with other indoctrinal forces that are out there? I mean, we're talking about the home. I mean, how many households don't even have a father? How
right.
many how many households, are brought up in some other kind of teaching that makes them, as long as you're a good person, and how you're a good person is all these things we talked about in the opening of the show. Like, um, hey, do you believe the right thing about the man? Do you have enough empathy and sympathy? Are you anti-racist? Are you, are you down with are you an ally to the rainbow cause? Like, and what's
Well,
interesting to me is that none of those forces give the reason why either. So it's kind of, but yet it's more appealing and fun and to our desires and appetites on that side of the fence than apologetics is, because
I think I would argue with that, Trey. I would think that specifically um, anti-fascists, I'll use them, the
Mhm,
Antifas, just use
mhm.
them as an example. I think the average run-of-the-mill Antifa member has a better version of apologetics than the average Christian does. What I'm saying is that Antifa person can articulate a position to explain why they wear a mask and run around and cause mayhem in the streets, and they can
Can they,
back.
or is it
I think
all,
they
or is
can.
it all just slogans?
No, I think they can because
well,
it's deeper than I just believe.
well,
It's more than Trump's bad because they'll say, well, it's because Republicans are racist. And you'll say, well, how? And then they'll give you some case points. They'll give you some talking points, but they can go 3 to 4 levels down with the why. I'm
well,
not suggesting that they can win an apologetics argument. I'm saying then the average Christian who, to Brian's point, their only answer is, well, I believe because it's true because I believe. Like those Christians can only go one why down and they instantly hit a loop.
um,
I know what I just said is disgusting and gross, but I think it's accurate.
well, but I think the foundation of it is still just pure
Of
emotional conditioning.
Of course it
Um,
is. I just
and
said more
and
Right, right,
layers down.
and
right,
to
right, right.
Dre's question, how do we compete with that? I think that exists to fill the religious
And,
vacuum
and I
left
think that's where I was
by,
going.
yeah.
Yeah, I
If there was a Christianity that offered genuine value to people, they wouldn't have that vacuum to fill. What we have as Christianity is not offering that value. It's offering community and people getting their social needs met. It's
but that's
a
everywhere. I
yeah,
mean,
and you can get that,
That's how
but
street gangs exist.
right,
yeah,
yeah, I can wear a blue football jersey and go to any, local bar and get that.
we were talking before the show. Matt and I were debating the translation of Second Peter 1:4, where it reads,
Nerds.
um, talks about participation in the divine nature and escaping the corruption of the world caused by, and the Greek is epithumia, which I think we agreed just means appetites. It's morally neutral. And the point of it is that humans in our fallen nature are we're relegated to the level of animals in that we are enslaved to our appetites. We are mastered by them. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with having appetites and using and letting them serve us to tell us how to meet our bodily needs. But when we are mastered by them, that turns us into beasts. Um, as Christians, salvation is given in the divine by giving us the divine nature so that we can we can rise above that. We transform into the likeness of Christ by making every effort to add to our faith those qualities of the divine nature. The reason I bring all that up, though, is that what we just kind of established in Christianity meets legitimate needs. But just like all these other groups, it does it by indulging our appetites, that need for community, getting our social needs met, having that tribal identity. These are all psychological appetites that everybody has. Everybody has to fill them, but that's not being indoctrinated and socially conformed to a local Christian community is not the same thing as being saved. It's not the same thing as participating in the divine nature. Participating in the divine nature it transcends that. And if you are participating in the divine nature, then you're not susceptible to those social pressures. You feel them. There's still temptation to be from your appetites, but you're not mastered by them, and so you're not going to be drawn into a cult or um, all the other stuff that happens to tear Christianity apart. So
Yeah, I think if the church relies on indoctrination, then the world will out indoctrinate us.
it's happening.
You, you know, so really the answer is just to return to Christ, scripture, and the spirit, and the reason for repentance, right? Like,
Well, more specifically, we need to tear down the false paradigm of of going to heaven when we die, and rediscover the true purpose of the church. It's the Bible reads very differently when you cut all that out and read it on its own terms. But also to relate back to the divine council worldview, uh, everything we've been discussing is spiritual warfare. We have an enemy who has deceived us, um, morally confusing us, attacking the thing that is most precious to all of humanity, which is our relationship to God, and by installing a counterfeit version, um, who is all about us going to heaven and abandoning this world and all the other stuff that goes into therapeutic moral deism. We're offered a God whose purposes are entirely different than what they actually are in the Bible. So,
roll credits.
Yeah.
Did we have a coherent topic at all? Like, was that what do we even
uh,
title this? Like, what?
um,
I don't know.
Western
Yeah,
civilization is collapsing. Um, how it's your fault?
it's your fault.
My fault?
I think I'm going to
Sure.
do it as a question. I'll be like, is the church responsible for the downfall of Western society?
The collapse of Western civilization, is the church the problem or the solution?
This is great content.
Well, I'm going to cut this, obviously.
Right.
Are you going to just cut it after roll credits and
I think so, actually. Yeah.
I I just it just seems like the church has kind of lost its calling, right? Like
I think it's the blockbuster effect.
we
I don't think it's adjusted. I think I saw this, I don't know if this is show content worthy or not, but you guys know I'm pretty involved with the Marine Corps League here.
yeah.
Um, there was this guy made a post into one of our national leadership threads, and he was asking AI to help him understand the problem with veteran service organizations. And broadly, it's the culture change in how Gen Z and Gen Y are motivated they're not joiners is the language that the AI was using. And so they don't want to join organizations. They don't want to join groups. They want to stay home. And it made me think about the church because, veteran service orgs were huge in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And it was one, they were built around being at the bar. But it was also around having a group, having, a culture, having your social needs being met. Well, social needs are met online now, which is an entirely different conversation, but it's also true. And
Well,
if you have parents whose social needs are being met online, like they're not inclined to go to church because why?
except social needs are being met online in the same way that nutritional needs are being met by, like, processed sugar.
Well,
Yet that is the nutrition, and if you don't know any different or
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
better,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
the churches, we can't just parrot the age, you know
Right.
we
Well, that's why I'm saying the Blockbuster problem, right?
right.
Blockbuster refused to change with the times, and they said, "No, we're how you get movies." And society said, "Oh yeah, hold my internet connection." And an institution that thought they were too big to fail no longer exists. Um, it just makes me wonder if is it really, is it an us or them problem? Because, you know, where there's two of you, so am I, right? Like the idea that there has to be 400 people in a sanctuary singing hymns that were written in the 1800s, like there's a line somewhere that
Right.
No,
says,
There is, but there's also that problem of, I mean, we have all these new trends that have to do with religion, and the new cool argument on YouTube is, Jesus was not Yahweh. And there's passages that support this or not. And some people, they have this Gnostic view of, the God was wrathful and killed people. And then when you get online and you say those things and it resonates with people, then every dude now becomes your pastor. So where there's two, there is six wrong people. And is
yeah,
is that is that better than people not showing up? I don't know that it
I
is.
well,
And I
I
know that
think
there's
that
a line, Matt. I know that you have to adjust, but at the same time, you still have to get real membership
yeah, and
and real buy-in.
I think the church would be shooting itself in the foot if it didn't offer itself as the antidote to this fake processed sugar version of getting your social needs met. Like, come here where there are real people. Of course, the church has a life online. Like, I'm on YouTube all day watching apologetics and Christian stuff. That stuff's invaluable, but it's only valuable if you import it into the church that exists in the real world and that meets together. Um, but I had another thought. I totally lost it. It was awesome too. It
No doubt.
would have just blown the lid off of everything. Um, I lost it.
yeah, you'll think of it in the middle of
Yeah.
the night or tomorrow, and
Somebody start talking. I'll
you'll
think of
send
it
us
while
you'll
you're.
send us the usual message that says, "I completely forgot to say this last night." And
Oh yeah, I think the blockbuster thing. That's a valid observation, but the problems with the church are more fundamental. Um, like in the fourth century, when Christianity was made mandatory, Theodosius 385 issue made it the no, in 380 made it the official religion of the Roman Empire. If you lived in the Roman Empire, you had to be Christian. If you were a bishop who taught the wrong thing, will kill you, and they did. Like a few years after that, they executed their first heretic. Um, so now, like even with all the problem, like, and there are other problems that I've talked about, the Platonic metaphysics coming in the third century. But you at least had to, like, they initiated you with genuine faith. They taught you why Christianity was true, and you
Did
joined
they?
it.
You know that?
Yeah, I do know that. We have their writings. Athanasius on the Incarnation has an excellent crash course in apologetics. Like, they're engaging with, and I would probably like, but yeah, I mean,
I mean,
you can read Athanasius from the fourth century to someone today, and he presents cogent arguments to persuade people that Christianity is true. And they were coming out of the most severe empire-wide systematic persecution of the church. So if you didn't believe it, you're paying a pretty high price to be there. When you make it compulsory under law, where you have to be Christian as a matter of civic conformity, well, that totally transforms the nature of the religion. Now it's not, you're not even allowed to ask the question, is this true? If you do ask the question and the answers that you come up with are wrong, you could be executed for that. That fundamentally changed the nature of the just the very word faith. And I don't think we've, as collectively, we haven't really recovered from that. We still take Christian doctrine and matters of, that phrase, matters of faith,
And dogmatize it?
well, we put it in this totally different category of thought that's not allowed to be questioned, because it's sacred. And there was a time when you'd be killed for that, and it seems like we'd be free of that today with the First Amendment, but you have all these calls for Christian nationalism. Catholicism is seeing a resurgence, and you have so many Catholics who blame the Protestant Reformation for all of the problems that we have. Well, back when we had a pope and everybody had to listen to the pope, you didn't have these problems. They'll argue. Um,
Because they killed you.
yeah. Um, which isn't faith. That's just civic conformity.
I saw a theory that Bigfoot is Cain, and that's why there's no bones,
That's
because
why he's blurry.
well,
That's the mark
it's
of Cain.
well,
Is
it's
he's
the
blurry.
fur, and
the
that's
first.
why he can't be killed, because he's blurry, and that he's never died because he was doomed to walk the earth. They blended the Cain thing with Longinus, but like I thought it was a cool little fan fiction theory. I was like, wait, okay, maybe that's cool.
Hmm.
We have any and no last words, right? Everybody,
Now I'm
we
tapped out.
did no save rounds. Cool. So with that, I will say stay curious, stay enlightened, and we will see you next week. God bless.
I have no idea how I'm splicing this show together.